This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Rwanda and Kenya confirm cases of the Omicron variant amid a surge in COVID infections across Africa. The WHO investigates an unidentified disease after nearly 100 people die in South Sudan. And popular Congolese Rumba wins UNESCO World Heritage status. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Ramanyang with a preview of your business news.
That's right, Lindy. Here's what's coming up in the next half hour. Headline inflation in South Africa has gone back to levels that we last saw in the first quarter of 2017. And Tanzania has unveiled an all-women factory. We'll have the details on that business and plenty more in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Lindy.
Thanks, Rama. Well, in our top story, the WHO is urging people to not dismiss the Omicron variant. The body's Director General, Tedros Ghebreyesus, says the variant has been detected in 77 countries so far. He noted that even though mostly mild cases have been recorded, the variant could still overwhelm health systems. The Omicron variant is a highly transmissible mutation of COVID-19. It was first recorded and reported by South African scientists.
Omicron is spreading at a rate we have not seen with any previous variant. We're concerned that people are dismissing Omicron as mild. Surely, we have learned by now that we underestimate this virus at our peril. Even if Omicron does cause less severe disease, the sheer number of cases could once again overwhelm unprepared health systems. I need to be very clear. Vaccines alone will not get any country out of this crisis. Countries can and must prevent the spread of Omicron with measures that work today. It's not vaccines instead of masks. It's not vaccines instead of distancing. It's not vaccines instead of ventilation or hand hygiene. Do it all. Do it consistently. Do it well.
Now, authorities in both Kenya and Rwanda have confirmed their first cases of the Omicron coronavirus variant. The heavily mutated strain continues to spread on the continent, with Kenya and Rwanda joining a list of affected countries. Rwanda's health ministry on Tuesday said the country had detected 6 cases. In Kenya, the health cabinet secretary said they detected 3 cases in the coastal city of Mombasa. Both African countries are pushing for people to get inoculated. 40% of the Rwandan population is fully vaccinated and has started issuing booster shots. In Kenya, vaccine uptake has been slower. Well, let's bring you more on this now. We're joined by CGTN's Enoch Sokolia here with us in Nairobi. Enoch, a rise in cases. Talk us through what's driving this latest surge in East Africa.
Well, Liz, Linda, you've talked about that, and what I can affirm to you is that the surge is real, because in Africa alone, we are talking about 83% surge in cases in the last 1 week. When you compare with the previous week, when we are talking about the last 1 week, it's the week that ended on the 12th of December. So we are talking about a serious surge in the spread of the coronavirus, and especially when we are talking about the Omicron variant. Now, you talked about Rwanda and Kenya being the latest. Now, that when you add together, now we are talking about 13 countries in Africa reporting having received or having recorded the new variant, and it's really spreading, and Kenya being on alert now, Rwanda being on alert now. It only means that the more countries keep testing, the more we'll see this virus spreading. To give you another figure, is that in the last 1 week, Africa experienced 196,000 new cases. It was a rise. Previous week, we were talking about 107,000. So it's a significant rise. And from WHO regional office, they are saying that the variants that are driving this rise in numbers, in cases in Africa are two, Delta and the Omicron. But as you've heard from WHO Global, they are talking about the mild infections, but also concerns are being raised about how Africa vaccine uptake and what it could lead to, because what we understand about variants, it's about mutation, but when we talk about vaccine uptake and vaccine availability in Africa is a different ballgame, Linda.
Indeed. And of course, you've mentioned those figures that really do paint a rather worrying picture. Now, lockdowns and curfews have been the standard response across Africa, much to the detriment of the continent's economies. Do we expect to see similar restrictions being imposed as a result of this new surge?
It will depend on different countries, but what we've heard from WHO in Africa is that they are against it. They are just saying we look at the local effective measures. We are talking about sanitization, talking about maintaining social distance, and also ensuring that there isn't much gathering of people, especially this time. And you understand that we are heading to festive season, and it's a great concern across the continent that people will be moving around and people will be interacting, people will be gathering in different places, in social places, as they go through the festive period. And so it's a big concern, as you say. But what we are seeing is most of the countries are yet to announce strict measures, but we are looking at, with the increasing numbers, they are likely to adhere with what the WHO regional office is advising, that we go with the local effective measures that have worked in Africa, because they are saying that, and as you put it, that some of the restrictions that were used, lockdowns and restrictive movements, were not good for Africa and will not be effective, and actually will be counterproductive.
Well, that is something to certainly keep in mind as Africa tries to find its way out of this pandemic. Thank you so much, Enoch Sokolia, with us here in Nairobi. Now, even though mostly mild cases of the Omicron variant have been recorded, medics certainly warn that this variant has the potential to overwhelm hospitals, as it certainly spreads a lot faster. We spoke to Dr. Sabelo Khadebe, a senior lecturer and immunologist at the University of Cape Town, about the implications of Omicron and its impact on Africa's health systems.
It started mainly in Pretoria, so Gauteng province, and cases have been going up there quite quickly, and it's obviously spreading to other provinces as well. I mean, just today we reported about 17,000 new cases. So it is spreading fast. I mean, it's doubling every 2 to 3 days. But what is encouraging at the moment is that it doesn't seem to be, we don't get severe cases. So I think that's promising, but obviously it also means it has a potential to overwhelm hospitals. So that's essentially what we know so far. It is setting the world back a bit in terms of handling the pandemic. I mean, if you look at the latest data on the vaccine effectiveness of vaccines, so what we know right now is that it probably, with the new variant, it drops to about 35% in people that are fully vaccinated, so 2 doses of Pfizer. So that is discouraging, but I guess it also means that, if you look at countries like the UK, they've had 3 plans. I think it was Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, and they're having to really change and review almost everything because cases are going up and hospitals are also struggling. So I mean, these are countries that also have, almost full vaccination. So yeah, it is setting the world back a bit in some ways. But I mean, I guess we always knew that variants were always going to come. We just had to be ready. I think the vaccine inequity is a real big world problem. Africa, I think less than 10% is vaccinated. So that's, we're not going to reach those targets or vaccinating 40% of the population by end of this year. And probably, a lot of countries probably towards 2023, that's when they might be able to vaccinate at least to the first dose. If we're talking boosters, we're really far ahead in terms of the conversation that we should be having in Africa of actually getting vaccines to give people that first jab. So I think the countries that are holding vaccines, they should fast track that. And give us the vaccines to be able to vaccinate people, at least give them the first dose.
Well, that's staying in South Africa. A new study is looking into the effectiveness of the Pfizer vaccine against the Omicron variant. Conducted by Discovery Health and the South African Medical Research Council, the study has found the Pfizer vaccine provides 70% protection against hospital admission. Now, this is a drop from the 90% protection the vaccine provided against hospitalization during the country's last COVID-19 surge. CGTN's Lindy Mtongana has more.
This is the first study to show that the risk of hospitalization is lower during the Omicron-driven fourth wave in South Africa than it has been in the previous waves.
In terms of the vaccine effectiveness of the double dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech regime, the vaccine effectiveness has reduced from 80% in the Delta wave to 33% now in this Omicron wave against COVID-19 infection. Quite a material reduction. But the vaccines were developed to prevent severe illness and death. And what is very encouraging is that the vaccine effectiveness of this double dose of Pfizer-BioNTech holds at 70% in the Omicron wave against severe complications of COVID-19, which we measure by hospital admissions.
The study began 3 months ago, before the Omicron variant was detected, but it includes recent data. The study, which was done in collaboration with the South African Medical Research Council, looked at some 211,000 COVID-19 PCR test results among adult patients. It also found that the lower rate of hospital admissions during the fourth wave of infections could be related to the population having greater immunity from earlier infections and COVID-19 vaccinations than in previous waves.
The important thing is that we know after 12 to 14 days after you get your second dose, you have an induction of a great immune response manifested by lots of neutralizing antibodies and binding antibodies. And this will mitigate the issue around Omicron.
Professor Gray, however, cautions that this does not mean Omicron is a less virulent strain of the virus.
Looking at the short incubation period and the short duration of illness, that's a good sign. It means that people are clearing the virus quicker. But it's also important to see how long people shed this virus for and whether any people with lowered immune responses harbor this virus for longer, which makes viral evolution more likely. So I think we have to keep looking to see.
The discovery of the Omicron strain last month triggered alarm that it could cause another surge in global infections. It also led many countries to impose travel restrictions on the Southern African region. Lindy Mtongana for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Sinovac Biotech has announced the results of its preliminary study on whether its CoronaVac vaccine is effective against the Omicron variant. Sinovac had acquired 2 Omicron virus strains from Hong Kong and conducted neutralization tests. The positive rate of neutralizing antibodies produced was 94% in 48 samples inoculated with 3 doses of CoronaVac. Sinovac is running more studies to get a comprehensive evaluation of the impact of Omicron on the vaccine. Well, turning to other news from China, the country's President Xi Jinping held a virtual meeting with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin this Wednesday afternoon. The 2 leaders evaluated the development of their countries' ties over the past year, with Xi outlining the need for both countries to demonstrate responsibility. Putin also confirmed that he will be present at the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. Wang Hui has more.
The virtual meeting between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin has become another boost towards the two countries' bilateral ties. The two leaders evaluated the achievements made over time, with Xi pointing out the achievements made in trade, cooperation in technological innovation, and the Belt and Road Initiative. Xi said he's willing to cooperate together in various areas to facilitate the development of ties. Putin said China-Russia relations over the past year are highlighted by the 20th anniversary of the Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation, with both parties agreeing to prolong the treaty by another 5 years. Putin also confirmed he will attend the opening ceremony of Beijing Winter Olympics on February 4th. This comes after America's recent announcement they will not send governmental representatives or diplomats to the event.
Next February, I expect we can finally meet in person in Beijing, as we have agreed. We will hold talks and then participate in the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympic Games.
Xi welcomes Putin's visit.
I'm very much looking forward to our personal meeting at the Winter Olympics. I'm willing to join hands with you in the future and work together to write a new chapter in Sino-Russian relations in the post-pandemic era.
Xi mentioned, although the world has undergone turmoil and transformation, China-Russia ties have shown new vitality and energy. Also noting that the two countries should unify the world to fight against the pandemic and demonstrate the true meaning of democracy and human rights. Xi pointed out at the meeting that China and Russia should demonstrate the responsibility they have as major powers, shown through practicing real multilateralism and maintaining international fairness and justice. Wang Hui, CGTN, Beijing.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Hundreds of thousands left homeless by floods in South Sudan. And displaced by carnage, Cameroon refugees flee to Chad.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Marawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from
the front line. Within clear view of this front line position.
We start in South Africa now, where the Pretoria High Court has ruled that the decision to place former President Jacob Zuma on medical parole was unlawful. The court ruled that the former president should return to jail. Zuma was placed on medical parole by the former National Commissioner of Correctional Services, Arthur Fraser. He'd been granted parole on the basis of ill health. The former president is currently serving a 15-month term for contempt of court. The Tunisian President Kais Saied announced in a speech to the Tunisian people a set of measures on the eve of the celebration of the 11th anniversary of the country's revolution, citing in particular the holding of parliamentary elections for December 17, 2022, and the extension of the freeze on parliament until the organization of this election.
The head of state also announced the organization of public consultation via online platforms from the 1st of January 2022, to which direct consultations will be added in each delegation of the country and abroad. The work of this consultation should end on March 20th, 2022.
We will build a new and different history from the previous rulers. We have all the means to succeed and to realize our objectives and our demands in order to live with dignity and not under the rule of coalitions. We accept cooperation in all sectors, but it should respect the will of the people.
Qais Said said that the draft constitution and other political reforms will be submitted to a popular referendum on July 25th next year. The work of the coordination committee between the various proposals and responses made on the electronic platform should end before June 2022. The opposition has decried the president's decisions.
The president did not announce a roadmap. He announced an agenda to impose his own will and project. He ignores the civil society. He does not engage in dialogue with anyone, and he does not listen to anyone. He relies on his own convictions and does not seek advice.
The president's move and its content is a problem. It is impossible to hold a national consultation on digital platforms. This system will not work. A so-called committee made up of 3 experts will then decide for the whole country. The president will do everything to stay in power.
Analysts have said that the Tunisian president was under pressure from the international community to announce his timetable for political reforms, as well as the agenda for the upcoming elections.
International financial institutions and foreign donors imposed conditions before providing loans and funding to Tunisia for its 2022 state budget and resuming negotiations with the IMF. The president had no choice but to announce his agenda for next year. Some people have welcomed the speech, but many Tunisians believe that the president's decisions are unrealistic and will not solve the problem.
The Tunisian president called for the trial of those who have committed crimes against the state and the people, urging the judiciary to exercise its full function within the framework of impartiality. Hundreds of public figures, politicians, civil society activists and members of the dissolved parliament have announced the creation of the National Rally for Salvation. This new political structure is designed to develop a project for economic and social salvation and a return to representative democracy in the country. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Political forces within the bloc of the Forces for Freedom and Change in Sudan have reneged on an earlier agreement. Forces allied to Sudanese Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok have denied the political declaration, saying it does not represent the alliance. Those in support of it say it addresses various demands of the protesters. The leader of the alliance has called on the opposing political forces to reflect on the declaration before rejecting it. Sudanese protesters have been staging weekly protests demanding for a return to civilian rule.
Of course, the protesters have already made demands, and we understand very well the demands of the street. But in fact, the initial agreement between Hamdok and Al-Burhan was tantamount to ending 50% of the coup, and this political declaration will ensure that the coup is completed by 100%.
A World Health Organization task force has been sent to South Sudan to probe an unidentified illness that has killed 89 people. The country's health ministry has reported that an unknown disease had killed tens of people in the northern town of Fangak in Jonglei State. Now, according to local health officials, initial samples from the sick returned negative results for cholera. Meanwhile, aid agencies are calling for more support from international donors to try and mitigate the devastation brought about by flooding in parts of South Sudan. The country has been facing widespread flooding since May, affecting large parts of the population and their livelihoods. Local officials say over 835,000 people were impacted by flooding in 33 out of 78 counties as of the 8th of December. The states of Jonglei, Unity and Upper Nile remain the worst affected, housing some 80% of the hardest hit people. The flooding has caused mass displacement, with thousands taking refuge on higher ground within their counties. The United Nations says the flooding has hampered people's access to essential services, as homes, nutrition and health facilities, water sources, schools and markets remain submerged.
The flooding here has now reached a level never seen before, and it keeps rising. Schools, homes and livelihoods are washed away. The United Nations says more than 800,000 people have now been displaced by the flooding across South Sudan. Bentiu in the north of the country is the worst hit area so far. The local government says more than 90% of the state's population is displaced and relies on food aid.
The food given to us by the United Nations is not enough. When we get the food, it finishes before the next distribution date. Another issue is there's nothing else to add to the food given by the UN.
Water is now threatening to overrun the entire town, including areas where those displaced are sheltering. Authorities here say for the past 2 months there have been no rain in this place. However, the water levels continue to rise, and now the fear is that another rainy season will come and worsen the situation. Experts say the high volume of water in the Blue Nile from Ethiopia is blocking water from the White Nile from joining the Nile River. That's what is leading to flooding here.
We feel that we should begin now to construct a better dike that can never be breached by the water should the next rainy season find us in this situation. That is the only way that will help us. We have no any other. As you can see, the entire town is taken by the water. But people still believe that the worst is yet to come.
The state government says with support from the United Nations, it has constructed more than 50 kilometers of dikes to try and secure the remaining parts of the town, but it says more work still needs to be done. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Bentiu, South Sudan.
Refugees from a resurgence of inter-ethnic fighting in northern Cameroon have found a safe shelter in neighboring Chad. They've spoken out about the violence which made them flee their homes. CGTN's Joy Kirukijuma reports.
Cameroonian nationals now turned refugees in neighboring Chad. A camp outside Chad's capital, N'Djamena, is where they have found safety.
I was tortured by 7 people from the Arab community. I was seriously wounded on my back by machetes. I nearly died far out in the bush, but luckily my relatives found me and took me across the river. The conflict there has become very violent. I don't want to go back.
Authorities in Cameroon say at least 22 people have been killed since the clashes broke out in early December. This followed disputes between Arab chore herders and Musgum and Massa farmers and fishermen.
Clashes have taken another turn with the use of war weapons. Violence is everywhere in the city, and we have seen innocent people being massacred. The Cameroonian government did not react in time to stop the violence. We were forced to cross the river to find refuge in N'Djamena. We thank the Chadian authorities because we are safe.
The number of such refugees has risen 60% in the past week. Chad's Minister of Territorial Administration says this has put substantial pressure on local communities, which were already facing food shortages.
The government will provide security and medical care for refugees in critical conditions, but for the others, we will need international and humanitarian organizations to mobilize so that everyone has access to the basic necessities. We must show solidarity with our Cameroonian brothers who have found refuge here.
The United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, says it is responding to the crisis and admits the situation in the far north region remains volatile. Government officials say security forces have been sent in an effort to restore calm in the volatile region. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
China has donated $2 million to the UN World Food Programme to provide take-home food rations to students in Uganda. The WFP will reach 120,000 students in 300 schools across the Karamoja region in the northeast of the country. Isabel Nyakiria reports.
The WFP has stepped in to support the school feeding program even when schools remain closed. The food agency says the support from China will enable children to stay on healthy diets, even at home. Before schools closed in 2019, the WFP was providing hot meals to 157 students in the Karamoja region. The take-home rations now replace the in-school meals.
Their homes are very clear, and we've seen that the children that I was given an example is of a better debater that coming up, the number one student in that primary school, are all as a result of the children having food at home while they are studying.
The Karamoja region in Uganda is food insecure and malnutrition levels are high due to the semi-arid climate. It's also one of the poorest regions in the country, with poverty levels at over 60%. And China says it's committed to supporting the school feeding program by ensuring children in the Karamoja region do not go hungry.
As you know, this pandemic continues to ravage and has caused negative impacts on economic and social development, but also caused severe impacts on the daily life, especially those vulnerable people.
According to the WFP, children who received the take-home rations world over have shown great improvements in learning while at home. The agency says when children are hungry, the possibility of them dropping out of school is high, and many end up getting engaged in child labor. The WFP hopes the take-home food rations for students will increase retention in school. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
All right, time for your latest business news now with Raman Young.
Thank you very much, Lindy. Here's what's coming up in business news. Headline inflation in South Africa has gone back to levels that we last saw in March 2017. And we'll take you inside a factory in Tanzania that's run entirely by women. Let's start in South Africa. Headline consumer price inflation accelerated to 5.5% year-on-year in November from 5% in October. That's the highest level since March 2017, according to data from Statistics South Africa. Now, the data does show that on a month-on-month basis, the consumer price index went up by 50 basis points in November compared to 20 basis points the month before. Core inflation, which essentially strips out the prices of foods, non-alcoholic beverages, fuel and energy, also rose 3.3% year-on-year last month compared to 3.2% in October. Now, the South African Reserve Bank did raise its benchmark policy rate last month, and it also signalled further increases as well. Policymakers, however, may be forced to rethink that approach as international travel bans imposed after the discovery of the Omicron variant in the country risk stalling its economic recovery. Rising fuel prices in South Africa are driving up the cost of most basic commodities in the country, and that's making it pretty difficult for many to get by. Food prices, in fact, have seen the sharpest rise, with most South Africans already spending a huge part of their income just on that. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu taking a look at the latest Household Affordability Index.
Fuel prices in South Africa shot to a record high this year in line with higher oil prices. Motorists are now paying around $1.33 per litre of petrol. This has filtered through to all industries, having the largest impact on food.
Over the past year, we have seen the petrol price, the fuel price in South Africa increase by over 30%. Fuel is such a major input into the productive and manufacturing process that it inevitably, when there's an increase in fuel prices, it increases almost everything in the economy that is produced.
The situation is worse in Johannesburg, the economic capital of South Africa. Being inland means higher transport costs. According to the latest Household Affordability Index, the average basket of basic goods rose 6.3% in November compared to last year at the same time. On a month-on-month basis, the price of the basket was lower in all other regions, except in Johannesburg.
We have to look at household expenditure versus household levels of income to see at what stage there is affordability. And so we have to look at, for instance, the most basic household expenditure. Electricity prices over the past year increased by about 15% across the country. We have seen transport increase by roughly around 8% across the country.
A basket of basic food items came in at $285 last month. Experts are expecting this to be higher over the festive season.
When I revisited my banking app, I actually noticed that over the past 2 months, the bulk of my spending seems to emanate from food and food alone. Because of these fuel price hikes, I travel less frequently now because I've found myself having to pay 200 to 300 rands more to fill up my car, you know. It's ridiculous.
Meat and liquor prices have also escalated.
Going into the festive season, we expect that will have a negative impact on shopping activity. So retail sales for November and December aren't expected to perform that well compared to at least where we were last year. And if you also combine this with the fact that we are now starting to see interest rates rising.
With the impacts of COVID still weighing heavily on the workplace, there's likely to be less cheer this holiday. Some experts believe fuel prices will rise further in the new year as more industries start to scale up again. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Many in Zimbabwe are reeling from consecutive pandemic lockdowns, which have restricted business operations and drastically reduced household income. Now, the cost of living in the country is also soaring due to a depreciating currency. It's down about a third against the dollar so far this year, and that in turn has stoked inflation. Zimbabwe's central bank is forecasting that annual inflation will end the year somewhere between 58 and 60%. Here's Farai Makutuya with the details from Harare.
Things just haven't been the same for drinks vendor Kudakwashe Kambakunjana since the COVID-19 pandemic began. The initial 21-day lockdown in March last year nearly put him out of business, and he's been struggling since then.
I had to spend all my capital and reserves during the first lockdown. I had to borrow to resume operations when the economy reopened. But things are tight and people aren't coming into town much, and there isn't much money in circulation. It now takes 2 or 3 days to sell drinks that I previously sold in a day.
He's walking a tightrope to balance his expenses with a drastically diminished income.
I have to be very strict with money and make sure that I have at least $1 per day to put towards rent at the end of the month. About 50% of what I make is spent on rentals and food. Another 40% is for transport, so I have very little extra money.
He's not alone. A survey conducted recently by a local human resource consultancy found that employees are spending as much as 78% of their incomes on food, rentals, and other basics. Despite declining from record levels in 2020, inflation still remains chronically high and has pushed up the cost of living.
We have already seen some levels of poverty coming back to the rise. Some people are surviving maybe from 1 meal a day. And these are some of the effects. And we have also seen a rise even in terms of the food, where basic food has gone on the rise. The cost of even transportation, people moving from one place to another, transport has not been very friendly. As far as health is concerned, people have not been easily accessing good health services for a fair fee. People, for them to access better health services, they have to use the private spaces, and not many people are affording using those private spaces.
A recent spike in COVID-19 cases has seen the renewal of tough restrictions, which will pile on more woes for many already hard-pressed citizens here. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
On our story in our inflation theme, this one is from Nigeria. This year's holidays festivities could become the most expensive in the country's history. Millions of consumers there faced with a dramatic increase in prices of basic commodities and living expenses. CGTN's Phil Ihaza has the details from Abuja.
It's Christmas shopping time at this market in the heart of Abuja city. But for many buyers, the increase in prices is putting many of the things they want out of reach.
It's really bad. Everything has gone
twice the price it used to be before.
The market should be bubbling, right? But what do we see here? The market is scanty. So people are just trying to manage their reserves till Christmas Day.
At major festivities like Christmas, higher demands from consumers push prices of commodities up. But many people say this is the worst year in recent memory. An increase of up to double last year's import duty by the Nigeria Customs Service has many importers raising the prices of commodities brought into the country. And as the country began recovering from last year's pandemic-induced recession, inflation has reached 16%, cooking gas has increased 200%, electricity and fuel prices have increased as well.
The fact is that government has problems of having very low revenue base. Now, before now, we used to have up to production capacity of about 2.2 million barrels per day, production of oil. But today, we are not even doing up to 1.4 million barrels per day. So we can't even reach our OPEC limit given to us. And so that has affected our inflow of revenue of foreign currency.
And since Nigeria largely depends on imported goods, this has affected the prices of goods at the markets. This new reality could continue shrinking the purchasing power of millions of Nigerians. Nearly half of the country's population lives in poverty, with the minimum wage below $80 per month.
We need to look at all the sectors we have and make sure they are functional and they are efficient. If they are not efficient, there's no money that's going to come from those areas. We need to be looking out of, we can't continue with lip service of saying we have to diversify. I don't even say that anymore. The issues of diversification are there. The avenues of diversification are there. So what we need to do is to make them efficient so that we can start generating revenue from them.
The government has reiterated its commitment to boosting other sectors of the economy aside from crude oil. That's part of its plan to lift about 100 million Nigerians from poverty within the next 10 years. In the meantime, many people are taking a good hard look before they make their choices this holiday season. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Final story for you coming from North Africa. Tunisia is forecasting that its national income will grow by around 6% by 2035 on the back of increased trade following the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Authorities over there are optimistic that the share of Tunisia's exports to Africa will go up from around 11% of total exports to nearly 20% over that period of time. Here's Adin Chouachi with the details from Tunis.
The removal of tariff and non-tariff barriers and the adoption of a trade facilitation across the continent is expected to drive the growth of Tunisia's economy. The country's Trade and Export Development Minister, however, called for safeguards to ensure the proper functioning of AFCFTA, including the adoption of measures to prevent anti-competitive practices while guaranteeing access to investment.
Tunisia would be one of the main beneficiaries of the advantages brought by the African Free Trade Area. The share of Tunisian exports to Africa will increase by 91% to reach 19% of total exports in 2035, compared to about 11% currently. We cannot reach this objective without a clear roadmap and regulations at the national and African levels.
The Director of Cooperation with Africa at the Ministry of Trade in Tunisia described the AFCFTA agreement as a promising alternative to redress the economic situation at the continental level. The expert added that this project will also boost economic activity in the North African state.
One of the main objectives of AFCFTA is to limit or remove export tariffs. This advantage will allow all members to export products at a competitive price. There are many opportunities for exporting companies throughout Africa. It will revive production, continental transport, and create job opportunities.
Tunisia was chosen by the German International Cooperation Agency, GIZ, among 7 pilot countries and members of the African Union to benefit from a support program for the implementation of the AFCFTA.
The aim of this program is to strengthen the capacities of Tunisia in the public and private sectors. For the private operators, GIZ works with the Confederation of Business Owners. As for the state operators, we work with the Ministry of Trade and other Tunisian parties involved in the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, from the negotiation to the implementation in Tunisia and Africa.
According to the Export Promotion Agency, Tunisia needs to overcome the difficulties that could delay the application of the AFCFTA agreement. The North African state also needs to develop the logistical infrastructure while strengthening the diplomatic and commercial presence in Africa.
Economists assert that the African Continental Free Trade Area is a comprehensive project that goes beyond the traditional trade agreement. Tunisia ratified the AFCFTA agreement in July 2020. The Ministry of Trade and Export Development will establish the list of products that will be exported to other African countries. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And I'll leave it there for the time being, but we'll be back at the top of the hour. In Global Business, we'll be exploring a trade dispute that's been brewing for the better part of a year. In East Africa, Uganda is now threatening to ban agricultural produce coming in from her neighbour over to the east, Kenya. But how did these two neighbours essentially end up in such a heated trade row? We'll explore that and plenty more at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Rama. Well, do stay with us here on Africa Live. Still plenty more coming up after the break. Up next, popular Congolese Rumba wins UNESCO World Heritage status.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
The United Nations Cultural Agency has added Congolese Rumba music to its UNESCO Heritage List. A joint application by the Democratic Republic of Congo and Congo-Brazzaville was approved during a UNESCO summit. Here's CGTN's Joy Kirukijuma with more.
It is cause for celebration in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Congo-Brazzaville. The approval by UNESCO to have Rumba join the coveted Cultural Heritage of Humanity list puts the dance style alongside Cuban Rumba, Central African Republic's polyphonic pygmy music, and the drums of Burundi.
The Independence Cha-Cha, this iconic song about our country's independence, is one of the triumphs in the history of our music. It's a source of pride for us and for our country.
Specialists have located Rumba's origins in the ancient Central African Kingdom of Congo. People here practiced a dance called Nkumba, meaning navel. Performances involved a man and woman dancing with a navel opposite the other.
The slaves on the ship played music, jazz and rumba. It's a symbiosis that our musicians here were able to tap into as well.
The modern version of Rumba, according to Andre Yoka-Lai from the National Institute of Arts, is 100 years old. Lai says the dance symbolizes cities and birds.
It is a passion shared by all Congolese today, whether from a secular or religious point of view. And it has become holistic. It touches on all areas of life.
Rumba stars are occasionally controversial or mired in scandals. On Monday, a French court convicted DRC performer Kofi Olomide of holding 4 of his former dancers against their will during tours. But the people of both countries say the dance lives on. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And coming up in your sports news, up next. Algeria, Tunisia and Egypt gear up for the semi-finals of the Arab Cup.